So the two pieces, which are technically kind of written together as a suite, but without actually officially being a suite, is Smokeless Fire and Smoke and Mirrors, which were both written for the SAMRO Instrumentalists competition in 2016. That year, I think there was obviously a focus on the clarinet, or I think, well, I can't even remember if it was specifically written as like a set work that if one were doing clarinet, that's the pieces, those were the pieces that one had to do. Yeah, it was written around 2016, as I mentioned. What is interesting for me at the time while I was writing it, it was either the first or the second time that I had shingles, which both times happened within a few months from each other. At the time, I had also been writing the Moments in the Life piece, which I did with Dennis Goldberg at the time. So it was all that kind of musical sound world that I was dealing with. The pieces themselves, they are related but unrelated, and the thing that I guess holds it together is the word smoke. So Smokeless Fire is about anxiety, it's about depression, it's about the sort of the less obvious things, like people close to you might know that you're going through it, but you're not necessarily showing off any smoke or anything like that. It's sort of the things that you carry quietly without other people knowing. And that was sort of very much because also connected to the shingles side of things, in as much as that it's something that you could obviously see the actual sort of chickenpoxy kind of markings, but it was much more kind of just like the feeling of burnout that people couldn't see. The markings being covered by a t-shirt or something like that. So there is that kind of, the feel just of sort of like carrying some form of burden, emotional burden, anxiety, which at the time, because of the Goldberg piece, was something that I was dealing with a lot of, trying to wrap my head around having to do this project. Also, especially I think from, there are moments in the piece, and obviously the whole, just what the work was about and the horrible things that Mr. Goldberg had to go through. I think of one of the movements is, which is also very clarinet heavy and sort of similar ideas as Smokeless Fire, which dealt with his time in the gallows, or living, or not living, but being in prison next to the gallows, and how that sort of ongoing thing of constantly every week hearing someone next door being hung. And just sort of because of what the whole piece is, because of what that whole piece was about, how it affected me, obviously, emotionally and mentally, having to sort of be in that world for so long. So yeah, Smokeless Fire, as I said, that's more about sort of like about depression and anxiety and sort of like, keeping it quietly to yourself instead of like, working on it or therapy and stuff. I'm much better now. The other piece is Smoke and Mirrors, where complete opposite idea. At the time as well, while I was writing these, even doing a couple of concerts at the time with shingles, that was fun. But that sort of thing of, we had a lot of concerts that were happening at the Blah Blah Bar at the time. And this was sort of like near the beginning of my obsession about having classical music or new art music being performed in areas like bars. So one of the ideas that I still kind of incorporate a lot at the moment is that sort of electronic dance element, that sort of dance music thing. And I always sort of thought of like with the Smoke and Mirrors side of thing, well, yes, obviously it's the same idea of kind of like, a front of like, that you're dealing with stuff, but hey, everything's fine. The other, it's more kind of along the lines of the nightclub atmosphere of like smoke machines and the mirrors side of things. I was envisioned the sort of those the disco ball kind of effect. Yeah, and a lot more kind of. I ended up developing quite a lot of this piece in another work of mine for clarinet, cello, and piano called "And Then the Drop." Again, sort of incorporating the sort of dance, electronic dance ideas, the kind of rhythm, which works its way into that piece. I never really agreed on a performance order for it. Part of me would kind of lean towards doing Smokeless Fire first and Smoke and Mirrors after that. But so the idea why I would lean towards that is there's obviously the kind of like, hey, the flashier one at the end. But knowing how a lot of the stuff I write tends to end on quite of like a slow, long kind of adagio kind of thing, it can also be done that way around. I think the idea always was that while so when I was asked to write it, it was that sort of thing of like that it can be connected, it doesn't have to be connected. And while I think they can be done as standalone pieces, there isn't really anything that sort of links the two together, although material-wise. Although, if I remember correctly, Smokeless Fire does have sort of the sort of like offbeat piano idea. And that's something that I use a lot in kind of the slightly more kind of like dance, electronic dance music gesture idea, that slightly offbeat kind of thing. So there is a little bit of that together, but it's not like I use any motives that are on the two. So yeah, I mean, it was very much written as you can either do it one by itself, or if you wanted to do both, you could do both. And the order, I think, was always very kind of intended that the performer could decide which way they wanted to do it. And I think either way works, like whichever way they like to do that. I think what's interesting about this particular piece and how I approach things, like I tend to generally, before I start, I think a lot about it. I don't really write a lot of notes or do anything like that. Every now and then I'll sort of hum something into my phone. It's like, this is an idea that I'd like to use. But I tend to spend a lot of time thinking, and then like, you know, a month later or whatever, I'll start writing, usually with some kind of idea. Where these are a little bit different to other things is that, so at the time, I was very much involved with the Goldberg piece. There were all these concerts that we were doing at the blah blah blah, where I still needed to churn out some form of program once a month that we had something to perform. So if I remember correctly, while these came along, I mean, I have to be honest, like that whole period is a little bit of a blur, but it was done a lot more kind of like, I need something like now, 2 short pieces that can just go out into the world. So I didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about it too much and let them all kind of happen. While when I start writing, I do tend to try and have an idea of like how I'm going to finish the thing. I do allow it to sort of take me on a journey, as it were, and kind of go like, oh, I hadn't thought of this, and just follow that idea and see where it ends up. And then, like, I knew very much so, because of like how I was writing at the time, that one of the movements definitely would have some kind of like dance idea or something like that. But yeah, I tend to just spend a lot of time thinking, and eventually just sort of like follow what it has in mind.